So, welcome listeners to the third episode of our Upskilled podcast series. I'm delighted to be joined by Zeshan Sattar, who's Director of Learning and Skills at CompTIA. Welcome, Zeshan.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Excellent. We're delighted to have you to talk everything digital, skills, IT, and also understanding the skills gaps and what we can do about it, and how certainly apprenticeships can be part of that solution in terms of addressing some of those gaps. But just before we kind of get into the detail, it's always useful to understand for kind of our listeners the background of the individuals that we have. So it'd be great to understand kind of your background, Zeshan, in terms of obviously kind of growing up and also how you got to where you are today, but also how that digital skill journey has really been part of what you've done over the last kind of number of years. So if you can give us a bit of background, that'd be great.
Great stuff. Happy to do so. So I guess I'm your archetypal geek guy, as it were. Just kind of casting my mind back when I think about how I fell into technology, and I think everyone falls into any career you do. Just it happens. Basically, I was a part of the Commodore generation. So if you remember Commodore 64 and 16, yeah. I was taught programming from my elder brother in BASIC. And then it was a simple case. So it was the advent of web, and I got into web design. Being a 13, 14-year-old, charging people £10 an hour to do some web design was absolutely great. No need to do a paper round. It was just, from the comfort of your home, just design web pages. And quite literally, I kind of followed that pathway into going to university to study cybernetics. I think I was the case of trying to forward future thinking like, okay, what computer science is computer science? What it is. However, what I wanted to do was to amalgamate engineering with computing. So I guess if you folks remember the film The Terminator, that was pretty much what the cybernetics was about. AI, robotics, engineering, all put together and to kind of become a discipline of itself. After a series of wonderful events, I ended up living and working in Japan. Initially to teach English, but it quickly changed to providing technical support from the schools I was at. And quite simply, when I was actually asked by the city council to produce my credentials of what qualifies me to touch the systems, I presented my fantastic degree in cybernetics. And they were very much case, okay, that's fine, but it's not enough. Now, if you know anything about Japanese culture, it's all about Kaizen. Continuous improvements. They're always the case of what are you doing? What's your next level? And I love that. It was a case of, okay, they were pretty much pushing me to do my first certification. So I actually get my first CompTIA and Microsoft certifications while I was out living and working in Japan. Came back to the UK, and again, the idea of kind of continuous improvement became a bit of an aspect for my career. When I came back home on a Sunday, applied a job on a Monday, Wednesday I had an interview, Friday I had a job. I asked the hiring manager, how did that happen? That was so quick. I've never been through a process so quickly. And they simply said, your certification brought me to the top of the list. That was fantastic. I was going and doing lots of great work for that organization there. And one day, someone said, hey, you could do some trading. Yep, I went and did some commercial trading. That was absolutely fantastic. And knock on the door, I fell into apprenticeships. So someone said to me, hey, come and become a trainer for apprenticeships. And I was teaching 16 to 24-year-olds in the, what says a level 3 technical diploma in IT competence professional. I can't remember the exact title there. It's before when we had the frameworks, essentially.
And how long ago was that, Zeshan?
Oh, gosh, that was 2007, actually. So remember that day. I'm going to come back to it later on.
Yeah.
Again, later on, I had a knock on the door and say, hey, become a program manager. And from becoming a program manager, I was actually looking after apprenticeships across the different spaces. So it was an interesting time when I was doing that job role. It was quite simply the sunsetting of frameworks and the rising of standards in apprenticeships. So initially I was talking to, I believe it was eSkills/Tech Partnership, and trying to figure out what the new standards look like. And I was quite pleased to see some of my ideas were taken into the standards, which is awesome. And again, knock on the door, and CompTIA said, "Hey, we've got a great role for you. You know, we've got these ideas. Come make them a reality." And yeah, I've been with CompTIA since 2015. Started as an evangelist, so literally doing what I'm doing right now, talking about people about tech careers and whatnot, to becoming more focused on workforce development, career-ready projects. So here in CompTIA UK, I look after our Cyber Ready program, which is about getting people from some technical backgrounds, so it could be anything. Again, we'll talk about that in just a moment, and moving them to a cybersecurity analyst job role. So I know I spoke for a long time, Guy, but that's
no, not at all. It's fascinating. It's always here to, and I always find it really useful and like I said, fascinating to understand people's backgrounds, their passions, and how they've ended up where they are. And you know, there's always a common theme in terms of that conversation, which is typically people following their kind of what brings them joy. You know, we've had other participants on the podcast before who certainly demonstrate that, whether it's following a career in early years. And it's certainly, you know, you've been doing this since 13, 14 years old in terms of your kind of passion for technology. So it's always great to see how that journey has progressed. And actually, one of the things you've touched on that would be interesting to understand is you kind of seem to have embraced that, I guess, kind of technology angle from an early age and going into that kind of element around university as well. Was that a popular route at the time? And kind of how was data technology and kind of seen, if you like, back in those days when you were going to university and deciding those kind of paths? And how has that changed, do you think, over the last number of years?
Well, that's an interesting question. I guess in terms of stereotypes, I think the stereotypes always been there about tech as there was. So you read all these studies where, you know, young people, children were asked to draw what a person in technology looks like. And they literally drew someone like me, as it was. So a person with glasses and kind of like, you know, with probably lots of technology in their hands. I think that stereotype's not going to go away for a while. It's and I'm trying very hard to break it. Because I think it's a case of what's happened, especially I would say in the last 15, 16 years, is that kind of evolution of the technology professional. So essentially, IT was seen as a back office job role. So, you know, you basically sit in a corner and you go and code, or you basically, you know, answering phone calls and telling people to turn it off and on again, as it were. And those stereotypes will always be there, unfortunately. You know,
that's what works, by the way, turning on your computer on and off.
Well, you know,
that's my go-to answer to most things when they don't work.
and the 9 times out of 10 it fixes it, but you keep on, if you have to keep on turning it off and on again, there's some underlying issues. We can talk about troubleshooting in a moment or two. But in terms of where the career, the technology professional has kind of evolved, it's very much focused upon, you know, I remember when I was doing my year in industry at university, it was my first job. It was with, I think the number of people in the company was less than 5 people. And I was one of those was 5 people. And in that role, and it was my kind of baptism of fire guy. So I was tech support. I was system admin. I was network engineer. I was a trainer. I was a salesperson. You name it, you know, whatever day of the week it was me basically. And that's fine. That's when I think people learn a lot more from small businesses than they do from larger businesses, because you get to try a bit of everything and find your passion, as you say, God. In terms of, you know, where we are now, as we've evolved and the landscape has changed what technology does for people, because it's become a norm, you know, no longer are we, you know, if you think, cast back in mind to the early 90s, Guy, we had those big desktop IBM PCs. We had that hulking giant Xerox printer. We had Windows 3.11. And it was a case of, that's where technology lived. It lived in the office. Now it lives in our hands. It lives in our wearables, as it were. So what that means is, the technology professional has evolved from rather being that back office individual. They're now, I would say, the VIPs of any company. Because if you think about, you know, when things go wrong, you know, you can't print, or you can't, you know, get onto your email, or there's a certain problem, who are you going to call? Definitely Ghostbusters is probably the IT busters, i.e. your tech support help desk. Or if you have a cybersecurity breach, you're talking to your internal tech /cyber teams. So in all those cases, the technology professional is such a fantastic, and I'm going to say it, it's such a sexy career because you're always learning something new. You are going to be at the forefront of everything that's going on in the industry at the moment.
Well, it's funny you say that word. It was actually a word that was on my mind in terms of, a career in technology. I believe now is seen as a sexy career, and perhaps 15, 20 years ago, like you said, it was seen as somebody maybe who sat in the corner there to kind of fix things. How is that, do you think, help to attract more individuals into the sector, or kind of change people's perspective around what is a role in technology and what are those different pathways? Because, there's no doubt, you look at the tech scene, in the UK, but overseas as well. There's an element of sexiness to it that probably wasn't there historically. And do you think that will continue and help to attract more people into the industry?
Now, I think we're in that kind of crossroads at the moment, Guy, where things go either way. We'll talk about numbers and people of not in the tech industry. But at the moment, if you think about the people around you, or the people that aspire to be. So, for example, my niece wants to be an influencer. She's 10, as it was. So I think great, you're to be an influencer, but wouldn't it be cool that you understand how that underlying technology works, as it was? So, yes, she wants to use things like YouTube and all these community platforms, but she probably doesn't understand the basic of networking. How does the transmission of data from one side to the other is done? How does the underlying databases and analytics functions? How can she make sure her data will be secure when she puts it out there into the wonderful internet? So all those aspects, people tend to brush over the glamour. And I think what I'd love to see is not when we talk about that next generation of technology training and education, is to kind of say, great, there's all the glamorous stuff, but just let's take a step back and go behind the screen and under the hood and figure out how does this all work. And once you understand how that all works, you can almost become a better influencer, better professional, regardless of whatever you do, because I personally believe, Guy, every career as we're moving forward is going to be touched by technology. So there won't be anything out there that doesn't have anything about technology. For example, now we're talking right now, we all have home routers, as does every single person connected to the internet in the UK would do. Now, how does that actually work? Is there something that you have to make sure you go onto the router and do, make sure it's secure? So all these aspects need to kind of be pushed a bit more forward. So rather than become like, oh, that's the thing for that technical person, like a geeky person in the background, it becomes a case of, I know that. Oh, I know how the networking works. Oh, I know how to set up security on my router. Because just the same way you know how to lock your door, you need to know how to lock up your router.
Well, it becomes mission critical. And if you look at businesses and organizations such as ours, as well, in terms of, we've got a workforce now of 250 or so staff, many of whom work remotely. And, certainly cyber awareness, security, and kind of making sure that people are aware of these things is far more relevant and important than perhaps what we were as a business even 2 years ago. And I think that understanding and that level of knowledge on an individual basis of how to be safe online, how to protect, kind of access, and how to be, ensure security, is something that we know as a business we're spending more and more time, effort, and kind of financial resource in ensuring happens, but also need to become more knowledgeable as well as an organization. And I guess the question is, and you mentioned your 10-year-old niece, the influencer. This all starts in schools, ultimately, when you look at the younger generation and people who are growing up with technology, and there's no escaping from that. Are, in your opinion, school curriculums fit for purpose? Is there enough being done in those early years for people to understand actually how these systems work, and also the kind of the upside, but also the dangers as well of not using these technologies in the necessary way?
Oh gosh, I'll be very careful what I say here, because I do talk to the Department of Education quite a bit. It's getting there. I feel there is a lot more work to be done. However, I feel there is a case of where technology is becoming a subject in its own right. whether, if we look at recent news reports and whatnot, they're saying computer science, the take up is very low. And I'm one of the people who probably be, saying maybe why it should be called computer science? Why are we so focused on the science side and be more focused on the digital and technology side? So again, bringing people into the fore and try to make it more attractive to them. And essentially, like you said, Guy, put those building blocks there that will allow us to kind of then build upon as they further their career. Because if we don't actually embrace that kind of technology learning and teaching, as it were, at that very nascent age, as it were, we'll have an issue. I know at the primary school level, there is a case for making technology accessible to all. But what I notice as children get older is one of the subjects that gets dropped very quickly. And I would love to see it as like the same way you see maths and English is a compulsory subject. Technology, whatever you like to call it, would also be a compulsory subject at GCSE to enable people to kind of go, okay, right, I've got an option to see this and take it forward into whatever career I want to do it in.
Yeah. And do you think the government's kind of initiatives, such as the introduction of the essential digital skills for kind of individuals and the ability for any adults as well as kind of learner to access that if they're not kind of, I guess, assessing at that level, do you think that there are steps that will help, or do you think we need to do more as well from an adult perspective to ensure that people have the necessary skills for the workplace moving forward?
Adult and digital skills is actually a subject close to my heart. So what I didn't actually mention earlier, although my elder brother taught me programming, is actually my mum taught my elder brother programming.
Okay.
So that it was more case. So she went on a course, she learned programming and said, oh, this is very good, let's buy a computer, and brought it to the home because she had that foresight to see. And I think things like essential digital skills is not just good for that adult learner, it's also good for parents to kind of become more part of their children's lives, as it were, because they can understand exactly what the kids are up to and how to actually harnessing technology in their everyday life. So I think that with the idea of essential digital skills, it's absolutely necessary. We can't really function in our modern world without it. I don't know about you, but we only have one. Well, the bank that I bank with, there's only one branch in my entire city now, sort of thing. So it's a case of it's very critical that if you want to do some bank transactions, etc., check your pay or whatever you want to do, all those skills won't be there unless you go out and get them. So I think that's important, not just for the individual, but also kind of to function in the modern world, but also then be able to be and be part of the lives of the kids and everyone around them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's really useful to understand again your background, but also how you're sort of supported in the home as well. And I think certainly from what I hear, you kind of family was ahead of the times, if you like, as well. And it'll be interesting to see as well as we move forward how families adapt to that as well as just individuals, because like you mentioned, there's various reports and industry standards out there, but you look at it and there's an argument where 90% of the UK workforce that's already in post will need to be digitally reskilled, upskilled over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. And how do you see, I guess, organisations like CompTIA and ourselves as training providers being able to support that? Is there enough supply? Is there enough awareness? What do we need to be doing to enable employers, but also individuals to get the necessary skills that they're going to need to have moving forward?
I think it first is a case of having some frank conversations. A statistic I saw not so long ago was the Office for National Statistics believes that the highest group of individuals that are going to be impacted by automation are your retail workers. Mm-hmm. So think about if you go to your local supermarket, I see more automated tills than people on the tills now. It's crazy. So where have those people gone? They have to gone somewhere. They haven't disappeared in the ether. And as technology moves and automate things out, as people's habits change, you're going to have a lot of people whose jobs are going to essentially disappear. So I think as a country, we need to be able to have those conversations, say, okay, right, what are we going to do for those individuals? How do they need to be supported through? In CompTIA, we're very much focused on advancing the IT industry and unlocking potential. And we want to find people, we want people, every walk of life, to kind of have a career in technology, because there is a huge skills gap, and we'll talk about numbers as well. I've kind of teased you that one quite a bit, but in terms of that kind of piece, we are trying to figure out, right, what can we do to help people to identify with the skills they need to have a career in technology. So we're going to be launching a whole series of foundation certifications. So for example, IT foundations, cybersecurity foundations in data and software development. So they're essentially giving people a taster in what those careers can look like. And once they can actually figure out their passion, they can move forward. Because, Guy, as you know, when people say, I want to work in, the health industry. Well, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want to be a nurse? Do you want to be a specialist in X-ray and cardiology? What is that thing? And same way in tech, when people say, I want to work in technology, like, where do you want to go? So, as an association, as a certification body, we want to kind of give people the idea of, they find out what they don't know. Next steps from there would actually be a case of working with organizations like yourselves to kind of help pulling those people through into either through an apprenticeship or a digital skills bootcamp or whatever it might be, to kind of help them to get them the role that they need to not just have a job, but to also have a career.
And how key is that advice and guidance? And like you said, you speak about digital or kind of IT, that there's such a breadth of different roles and specialities within that. How important is it that we break those down and make people aware, or give them an exposure to different parts of that, so that they do know what they want to do? And, for example, it sounds like you were very fortunate in one way. You knew from a very early age that kind of perhaps path you wanted to go down or where your interest lied. But for myself, I didn't necessarily have that. I've ended up doing what I love through luck, partly. How important is it, and how can we get individuals to, at an early age, to have exposure to this and to understand what are those roles of the future going to be, and actually what are those skills that they need to have, to be able to actually where their passion is as well.
Like anything, I love to say this word, it depends, as it were, and the other word that says every situation is different. And I think when you look at those elements, it's a case of the last thing I want to do is force feed someone like, you must do technology. And I think it's kind of almost stepping back and saying, what do you like doing? Okay, do you like talking to people? Do you like solving problems? Do you like really understanding the nuts and bolts of the modern world? Well, if you do, well, there you are. You are that technical support professional. You're going to more the infrastructure pillar, as we would call it. Or are you a case of, do you like making systems secure, or do you like breaking those systems? And that's where we focus more on cybersecurity. Are you more of a creative, that you like building things out and really actually making vision into reality? That's being more of a developer type person. And finally, do you like making sense of stuff? Are you a numbers person? Do you like finding patterns in different types of data? Hence why you're more focused on that kind of data pathway. So realistically, what we want to do is almost step back from the actual technology, but more focused on what the actual outcome of that job would be. So and then I would say side by side of that is really focusing upon the softer side. So we call it soft skills at the moment. I've heard it being called power skills. The latest trend is, and I kind of like this one more, durable skills. Yeah. Having the skills that will actually then will propel you to be working across the industry, regardless of whatever role you're doing. So having the teamwork skills, having the idea to be able to research, beating deadlines, all that jazz, basically being able to harness that and being able to apply that in an unfamiliar situation.
And it's great that you mentioned that durable skills. I love that element of it as well, or that terminology. And you mentioned being kind of back in kind of previous years, if you like, or in the past, an IT technician was seen as somebody that needed to know a bit about everything, but wasn't necessarily a specialist in something. What would be your kind of advice to listeners? Do you think once they identify the areas that they move to, is that career moving more towards specialism, or is there still an element of actually that individual is going to potentially need to do 4 or 5 different functions or different roles in time, and need to have that element of durability and flexibility to adapt to what future technologies might bring as well in the workplace?
Okay, so I'll share a little story with you actually. Yeah, it was last year. I try to remember when it was. It's been such a with the pandemic and things, you forget things. Back in 2018, 2019, I was asked to help on the Cybersecurity Council, the UK Cybersecurity Council project. So essentially, a whole lot of organizations came together as a group led by the IET to help set up the UK Cybersecurity Council. And within there, I was leading the work stream to focus on cybersecurity careers and pathways. Within there, we found when we're talking to different employers about what is that individual they're looking for, how do they expect their skills and knowledge to be like, and a term came up which was they want to be generalists and specialists at the same time. And then you think, well, hold on a second, how would you draw that out? And it was so obvious when I finally got it. It's that T-shaped individual. Because as you can imagine, everyone wants that kind of person to know a bit about everything. So maybe, let's say, taking technology as it were, they might know a bit about people, process, and technology as it was, as a top level of your T as it were. Then, in terms of specialism, it's like figuring out, okay, which area of technology are you going to focus upon, or which area or subset of that technology you're going to focus on, and that's where the specialism comes in. So I think it's a case of is age-old phrase, jack of all things, master of none. Well, in this case, they want you to be jack of all things, but master of one, as it were. And that's where what employers are really looking for, especially in the cybersecurity sector. And when I look at other data out there, it's the same across different areas of technology as well. So in terms of where we're kind of pushing people to, this case of I would say don't specialize too early. It's a case of go and learn everything. That was certainly what I did. And it just allows me to kind of then pivot into different areas, because it's a case of what I kind of admitted earlier was my project at university was controlling robots through speech. So I was using computational linguistics, artificial intelligence, but machine learning, because it can't do AI with ML, and also a bit of engineering and networking and all that jazz. But because I was able to do that, I'm able to then focus now when people talk about AI. I was like, yeah, I know AI because I did that back in 2004.
Those experiences and that absolutely. And you mentioned university, and obviously that's kind of one pathway open to individuals and kind of apprenticeships and various other kind of pathways. Are the right skills being taught? We work with employers, and one of their frustrations at times, not kind of for every role, but certainly some of the frustrations is people come out after perhaps a 3-year degree. Technology has moved on since that, from the time the curriculum was set, a bit before then, and they're not necessarily getting the right skills out of those individuals, and they're essentially having to then retrain them, whether it's through, again, apprenticeships or whether it's internally. Are the right skills being taught at university and kind of through those college pathways as well? And if not, how can that be improved with the speed at which technology is progressing?
Yeah, I hear that at the same time, and I'll share a little story from my Cyber Ready program that we did in the Northwest last year. So we had an individual who had a first-class degree in cybersecurity, and he was actually working as a chef. And he went on interview after interview. Yeah,
he couldn't find the right role, or
well, basically when he was applying for a cybersecurity job role, he would get to the interview stage and he would just basically be knocked out. So he came onto my Cyber Ready program. It was absolutely a high flyer. He was took everything as a sponge. We do 2 certifications as part of the program. We did the CompTIA Security Plus and the CompTIA CISO Plus, the Cybersecurity Analyst certification. I kid you not, guy. He basically passed the CompTIA Security Plus. The next interview went on. He aced it. He got the job on the spot, essentially. And it was a case of he came to me and said he learned more in that 3 months and cyber ready than he did at university. And I'm like, whoa, that is mind blowing. Okay, I think that he was probably trying to give me too much credit. There is what so I think what a certification does, it kind of focuses your mind, because unlike university where you're writing an essay, etc., you're kind of spread thin, whereas certification is more focused on that job role and is able to harness that information and be able to apply it quite easily at the interview stage. So yeah, I believe there's many, all roads lead to Rome, as it were. So you can have many pathways, but they're going to eventually get you to the same place, as it were. Whether that be university, whether that be apprenticeships, whether that be professional learning. But going back to the idea, what can universities do? I'm quite what do many solutions. So I think in your space, Guy, it's very much kind of focusing maybe more on degree apprenticeship programs. So literally, working with an organization like yourselves and an employer and kind of trying to deliver a program which is has that job from the get-go. On our side, we work with subject matter experts from across the world who help us develop our certifications. And that's why they're so highly regarded. So what was mind-boggling, just simply include a certification program so employers can understand how the student is benchmarked, and that will help them to kind of see how if they're especially an international company, how they've what the skills are across compared to people across the world. And I think finally it's more case of for universities to kind of keep up to date is to really look at the job market. I feel the fact that they look at this idea of, hey, we have our curriculum, we set it back in 3 years ago, and that's what they do. By the end of it, it's that they're selling short, I think. But it's not all is lost. I think this what they can literally do is look at talking to us, talking to employers, talking to yourselves, and kind of bringing that knowledge in. So when they come and do their final year, they'll be able to be more successful.
And that's a mind-blowing story, actually, that somebody coming out with a honours first class degree in cyber is not able to get a job out of it, which is something that we should all be mindful of in terms of the programs that we offer. And again, what do employers need and want from kind of that skill base, as well as just looking at perhaps what programs are we offering. And that's certainly a key takeaway for me for today, is to ensure that we are kind of on top of what the employers want and kind of need. And, as part of that, there's obviously, there's various statistics out there around the digital skills gap. How much kind of do you think is achievable in terms of actually, again, the speed and the growth of some of these organizations, both large and small? And, you've only got to look every day that there's kind of significant funds being raised by small organizations. Now, there's going to be some winners, some losers, as always, as part of that. But all of them are reliant on talent. And at the moment, again, from speaking to employers and just from everything you can see in the public domain, that talent is not there in the kind of the UK. What are those kind of next steps? What are CompTIA kind of, how are you working with employers to try and solve that, and also with organizations such as ours as well?
So I think we just got to look at some statistics out of it. I've been teasing this for a while, so we might as well talk about that.
Let's get these out of you.
Let's take cybersecurity, which is the area I've been focusing for the last few years on. So there's an annual need for 17,500 professionals every year in the cyber industry. Okay, with all the activity, universities, apprenticeships, people going through different boot camp programs, that's only giving us about 7,500 people. So there's actually a 10,000 people shortfall currently in the cyber industry. Kind of linking back to the story I told earlier, in terms of what employers are looking for. Well, basically, there's 37% of job roles aren't filled because the lack of technical skills. So technical skills at a higher level aren't being taught at the whatever program it might be. So it's very important to kind of look at that side of things. But the bit that I'm quite upset about, and this really frustrates me, is, and this same figure is true for both technology and cyber, there's only 17% of the workforce are women. Mm-hmm. And it's been 17% since 2007. So remember when I first started apprenticeships?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
hasn't changed. Okay, it's gone down up by a percentage, as it were, but it's still kind of holding at 17%. And that really frustrates me. Like, it feels like the last 15 years or whatever work I've done has made no difference whatsoever on the female side, which is quite frustrating.
Yeah.
Being from an ethnic minority background, I should also mention this, about 16% of the tech industry are from an ethnic minority background. But what really frustrates me on that side is when you go and look at the senior management level, that drops massively, as it were.
Yeah.
So we really got to figure out, what is going wrong in that kind of side of things. Because if you think about this right now, Guy, okay, how can you actually identify what a tech professional actually does? How can you tell the difference between a cybersecurity professional versus a software developer? They both will be sitting in front of a screen, tapping away. There's nothing to someone who's an onlooker. They won't even know what's the difference between a developer or cybersecurity professional. It's that same phrase of you can't be what you can't see. So what we need to do is almost kind of have these role models in the industry that can say, hey, this is me. This is what I do as a cloud engineer, and I'm female. I'm from an ethnic diverse background. We've got to have those role models, first of all, kind of leading that charge to kind of inspire the next generation.
And do you think that's a key part of what's missing? Is that visibility of saying, actually, somebody, if I'm female, somebody, there is a female in a leadership role here that's really pushing, striving, that's been that case study to open or to make people more aware, perhaps, of the different opportunity, and that the opportunities do exist there.
And I think that's critical, because if you kind of think about the stereotypes, and I think this is what we've still got, is the stereotype of that, that what a technical cyber or developer professional looks like. We got to have those role models to kind of go out and say, this is me, and the young women can actually look at that and say, actually, I can be that person, or I can do that job, because they can actually see themselves in that person. So it's very important that we establish those people, and we actually, bring them out in every opportunity. So I'm sure within your apprenticeship programs, you've got these great high flyers who have done great. We need to kind of bring them back in front of potential apprentices and say, this could be you. You just got to do these steps, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it's a key challenge. And I think, I don't know about yourself, we've started to adopt some of that more ourselves. We've certainly started to see organizations and employers start to adopt some of that more themselves in terms of mentor programs, but also case study. But it's a very relevant point, and actually that lack of perhaps progression in terms of some of these statistics and some of these kind of individuals that are getting involved in these sectors. And it's certainly something that, as a collective, I think we've all got responsibility to support and kind of break down some of those barriers. And some of the statistics you highlight there just illustrates how far there is still to go in terms of being able to do that. And how do we, as the UK, so obviously CompTIA kind of cover other kind of territories as well, how do we compare to other kind of peer nations, if you like, or kind of other parts of the world?
You don't really want to know the answer to this, Guy. Okay.
I think it's going to be great for our listeners to understand. Absolutely.
So the UK is in the top 10. I would not. It is, but more on the latter side, sits the side of more close to 10 than to 1, as it were. We're not doing too badly. As a nation, we are seen as a cyber power, and we have the right kind of levers to pull to kind of push that next generation of technical professional and competing against the world stage. But there's still always more that can be done. I think, for example, we mentioned lack of females in technology. We're sitting at like that 70% range, as it were. When we look at, especially within cyber, I think I can't remember which country it was, but I think it's Sweden. They're more like at 24%, as it were. So they're not, so we're not doing too badly, as it were. But there's always more we can do, I would say. So, but obviously, what we want to do is kind of be able to be not just be in that top 10. We want to be number 1. And when we want to be that number 1, what we need to be doing is kind of focusing upon what exactly is what we're trying to achieve. So being able to showcase the UK as not just a cyber power, but also a technology leading country. So where can we, and that's going to happen if we have the right talent. And one, I don't know if you see this guy, in my world, I have to look at different job adverts. And some of these job adverts really irk me because they have a list as long as arm. You must have A to Z, and the salary is 20K. Yeah. And you think, how can you even justify that? So
5 years worth of experience, and
exactly, so they're looking for unicorns that don't really exist. So I think what we need to do is kind of help employers to educate them and say, don't think about what that person's going to be, day one. Think what they're going to be in a year's time, 2 years, 3 years time, and they will end up, especially when you're doing apprenticeships, they end up not just staying for like 3 years, they just end up staying longer and become leaders in the organization. I think that's where apprentices are very powerful stuff. And when you invest in staff, the employees love that organization and never leave.
And in your opinion, are the apprenticeships fit for purpose? And I guess some of what we've spoken about is employers kind of, and again, I go back to this individual that kind of got a kind of the honours and first class degree and couldn't get a job in that industry. Are employers expecting too much? Is there more of a responsibility? And again, we've seen a shift of that in terms of employers that we work with say, actually find us the right people, and that apprenticeship then is that route to be able to upskill them and create our own talent. And do you think we're seeing enough of that? And also, therefore, I'm going to follow that up with another question. Are the apprenticeship standards fit for purpose? And one of the areas you've spoken about is cyber and the kind of raft of vacancies out there. And yet the amount of individuals studying on the cyber security apprenticeship standards is kind of, I think it's around 250 based on kind of in 2021 kind of statistics. So where is that disconnect? Is it the program? Is it the people? How can we bring those closer together?
Yeah, it's a tough one developing talent, isn't it? Realistically, I think there is no silver bullet. In terms of are the apprenticeship standards fit for purpose? They're evolving, that's for sure. I think when we had the recent review, it was a case of updating the standards, etc. For me, I was quite upset about the certifications being ripped out, as it were. But I think when you're trying to make it a bit more easier for providers, it's a great thing to do. However, if we don't kind of focus upon doing what's right for the employer, then we're kind of missing a trick here. So, for example, when an organization is doing an IT apprenticeship program and doesn't include, say, a CompTIA certification, let's look at the ICT technician, the information communications technician standard. Yeah. That's literally is our CompTIA A+ certification. So let me tell you a little bit about the A+. So I told you earlier about that office of the 90s. And what was the issue in that office of the 90s was the fact that when things went wrong, say the user can't print, do they call the engineer from Microsoft? Do they call the engineer from Xerox? Do they call the engineer from IBM? And when that situation was happening is when an engineer would come, they would mess up each of the settings. So when these organizations I mentioned were noticing this issue, they came to us and said, hey, CompTIA, we all belong to you. Let's kind of establish a vendor neutral certification, which becomes a benchmark for IT technicians across all our organizations. So that was the birth of CompTIA A+ certification back in 1993. We have a new one launching in April, and we keep on updating our certifications every 3 years. So when you'd have these programs which don't include a certification that is known and held by 1 million people globally, there's something going wrong, guy. So what we need to do is kind of pull in these employers and just remind them, what they want is not just to think about being benchmarked of, with an apprenticeship standard, which was great for the UK level, but we are in a post-Brexit world. We have to look at competing globally. And if we don't have our future and current technical professionals benchmark at a global level, then we're going to not be able to compete at that level. So we've got to think about that scenario as well. Now, so that's my kind of, sorry, my soapbox about apprenticeship programs as well.
No, I think we've got responsibility as providers, and I know certainly our technical team and IT team that work with kind of yourselves are big believers in kind of those certificates and in those qualifications. So exactly the reasons that you say, that they are then, something that's part of it. They're relevant, and actually they give somebody something tangible that they can go and use, whether it's here or internationally, and they are internationally recognized. And I think there's an element of a provider needs to take that responsibility to say, yes, it might cost a bit more to incorporate that, or it might kind of adapt it slightly when there isn't necessarily that requirement from the standard perspective, but looking at it from a learner and employer perspective in terms of what is best for those individuals as well. And so I think we form part of that ecosystem in terms of placing that importance on it.
And what kind of following up on that is continuous education, Guy, because the problem is, this is why I keep on doing my exam. When the new A+ comes out in April, I'll be doing it again as well. I think my 7th or 8th time of doing it as well. But no, I don't know why I do it. Okay, but let's go take exams for fun. But yeah, so the idea behind that is kind of that Kaizen piece again, continuous education, because the minute you stop in the technology career from learning, then you are a dodo, essentially. You have to keep on up to date. So when I first started back in 2005 doing the certifications, we didn't even talk about cloud. There was no cloud. Now, we talked about distributed computing, which was kind of cloud forerunner, but now, you can't do anything without talking about cloud. So when you start thinking about what was kind of the situation in the early 2000s to now in 2022, that's become a norm. Things change and we need to be able to change with them. And that's where it kind of goes into. So my worry is like, when someone's done an apprenticeship program, great, is that it? What are we going to do for those people to then keep on updating the skills? And that's where I think the government needs to think about that kind of lifelong learning agenda. I know they've got the national skills strategy as well. But I think there's a little bit of rethinking that needs to be done before it's rolled out more widely.
Absolutely. No, Zeshan, I'm conscious of time, and I could spend at least another few hours here kind of listening to you and kind of talking around all things kind of technology and digital and the future of the workplace and the future of kind of what employers want. And perhaps we'll follow up with another one later in the year, which would be great. The question I'd just like to always finish up on is if you were advising a young Zeshan in terms of the route, if they were doing an apprenticeship, which apprenticeship would you go for? It doesn't have to be IT; it could be anything. But yeah.
Well, you know what? Okay, I remember a trainer standing in front of apprentices, and we used to deliver the CompTIA certifications at that time, and I would look at them quite enviously. I said, like, I used to say to them, okay, they're 17, 16, 17. I said, like, by the time you do by the time they do the certifications, they will be 5 years ahead of me. And it always kind of like, I wish I'd done them younger as well. So yeah, I would definitely go back and do an IT technician apprenticeship standard. Definitely. That by hands down, I could probably would have hit my goals quicker, would have got there, to where I want to be. And I'm absolutely, I got to where I want to be, which is absolutely fantastic. But sometimes you want to had I had it a bit earlier, would I got there faster?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic, and it's good to see there would have been the ICT one as well, the IT technician program for sure. Perfect. Well, Zeshan, like I say, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really useful and very illuminating in terms of again understanding your background, what CompTIA do, as well as that future of the workplace and some of the areas we're all responsible for in terms of addressing these digital skills. And I think one of the things to come out is that there's still a long way to go, both right from a school level to college, university, training provider, but also from an employer level. We've all got a responsibility to inform our workforces, but also the next generation, to ensure that they've got the right skills moving forward as well, to give them the best opportunities in life, and to ensure that we've got that diversity and inclusivity as well, which is something that I think has certainly come out that we've, again, still got some way to go to. So thank you very much appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking again.
Thank you for having me.